Hey guys, it's Lawrence here, and just a quick intro from me before we get started with today's podcast. This is actually a membership podcast, a throwback, if you will, with Bill Crawford. And Bill was the owner of Basic Training in Scottsdale, Arizona. He's very successful, has a very successful studio business, great guy, and boasts a huge line of MedX equipment. He is one of the top experts on how to use MedX to get great results and give your clients great experiences. And it's one of the few people to have some really great instructional MedX videos on YouTube as well. So go check those out. If you just search Bill Crawford on YouTube, I'm sure they'll pop straight up. Just to be super clear, this membership podcast was actually recorded in 2018. So I will repeat that. This is not new. This was recorded in 2018. And the way I feel about, old membership stuff, is over enough time. I think it's okay to share that with you on the public podcast. The reason I'm repeating it and saying that it's a throwback and it's an older episode is because lately we've been publishing some older stuff, which I thought was really great and provided a lot of value. And I think people think it's new. And so there might be tiny bit of opinion that has changed over time, but I've listened to this back very recently and it's still extremely useful and very relevant. And Bill can correct me if he's changed his mind on anything, but I suspect a lot of it is still the same. So basically what happens during this podcast is it's because it was a membership Q&A, Bill essentially answers submitted questions from high intensity business members. So they're not actually live on the call. I collected the questions and then he answers those questions on the call, all about MedX. We really just focus on how to use MedX equipment to give better client experiences and drive better results. In terms of the audio on this is just audio only. So unfortunately, the only video is me right now telling you this, doing this intro. And obviously, if you're listening on a podcast, you don't care anyway. But this is audio only. In terms of the audio quality, the audio on Bill's side is so-so. So if you're listening in a noisy car, you might want to wait until you're walking the dog, but just try it and see. If you have it loud enough, it might be fine. Again, no video. So anyway, if you want more stuff like this, you should join High Intensity Business, where these days we actually do a monthly masterclass with an expert in strength training business, and you can ask questions live. So if you like this kind of thing and you would like to interact in monthly masterclasses like that to help grow your business, please go to school.com/HIB and all the details there to join. So that's school of a K, SKOOL.com/HIB. That stands for High Intensity Business. And if you're not ready for that, but you still need help planning your business, please download our strategy guide. And that's called the Hit Business Reset. And you can see that in the link below, in the description, or in the show notes for this episode as well. So anyway, without any further ado, please enjoy this exclusive membership podcast with Bill Crawford. Bill, welcome back.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Lawrence. It's a pleasure to be with you.
You're welcome. And I say welcome back because obviously we did a podcast together on the Corporate Warrior podcast, which at the time of this recording is not yet published, but it will be published very, very soon. So looking forward to getting that out into the world. But the focus of this members only episode is to talk all about MedX. MedX are obviously used by a lot of the members. A lot of them have MedX machines in their facilities. And you've been using MedX and similar equipment for many, many years. And from what I understand in terms of talking to you and watching your YouTube demonstrations, you seem to really understand how to use MedX effectively to get great results for your clients. And so very excited to just dive into the topic of MedX with you and ask a whole load of questions that were submitted by the members around how to get the most out of a kind of MedX arrangement. So I'm going to dive straight in. And the first question I wanted to ask you is, do you recommend full range of motion on the chest press, overhead press, leg press, seated dip, in terms of going all the way to full extension where the joints are locked out versus going a little bit short of the lockout position?
I recommend going just a little bit short of the lockout position, because when you go to the lockout position, the structure of the bone and the mechanics of the bone, they take over. So the muscles aren't under the load any longer. Plus the fact that having that direct force down on the joints of the bones, I don't think it's the best thing in the world for them. But it really kind of defeat the short route to muscle failure because it gives you a momentary break in there. So I always work with my clients so that they stop the movement just before the lockout position.
And will you, so just before that lockout position, will you kind of advocate a slow turnaround back on the negative portion of the movement? Is that accurate?
I said it is accurate. A slow enough turnaround so that I rest and stop the momentum and the inertia and take the skill out of it. You know, as you know, we're programmed for eons of time to perform the most amount of work with the least amount of effort. And one of the things that accomplishes that is learning a skill. And so when you watch people in the gym, they might be lifting a little more weight that they could handle if they were lifting properly, but they develop a skill, the speed at which they bounce off of the low aspect and not pausing at the top end, things like that. So we try to defeat all of that learned ancestral behavior and make it as primitive as possible so that it's as hard on the muscle as possible. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Just asking a follow-up question on this, because I can understand why a chest press or leg press, for instance, might be inadvisable to put the joints in a lockout position, or in other words, like a bone-on-bone tower is another way I've heard people describe that, for the reasons you just explained. But if you look at something like an overhead press, is it kind of, would it be perhaps different in that context? Would there be value still in locking out in that exercise, or does the principle still apply?
You know, if everybody's a little bit different because of their own individual flexibility. So if you can extend all the way up and you still feel the load of the weight being held up by your muscles, then I think that's okay. If you've locked out and you can relax those muscles and the weight's being supported by the bones, then it's not okay. So I guess most people, when they extend all the way up, if they lock out, that's probably not something I would encourage.
Right. Okay. But where perhaps someone's body structures allow them to feel continuous tension on the muscle, even when, let's say, their elbows are
Correct.
fully extended, then there may be some utility to actually locking out at
There's
least.
some value to that. As long as the muscle is still under the load of the weight, I think there's value to it. Once you transfer that weight to the mechanics of the bone structure, I think you lose the benefit.
Yeah, I think that's a great principle to follow in doing obviously any exercise. So no, I think that's a great answer. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, I guess that again applies into a tricep extension, right? So same principle applies. So if you're looking at a MedX tricep extension machine,
Yeah, definitely.
right?
Don't stay there, you know. Pause for a moment to arrest the momentum and the inertia factors, and then you go back into the eccentric contraction, eccentric phase of the contraction. Excuse me.
It's okay. So I'm going to be jumping around here, but I think that's fine because we're going to be talking about principles and then individual machines and just really going all over the place, but should be fun. So,
Okay.
so yeah, so just focusing for a moment on the leg extension. I'd love to hear how you coach a MedX leg extension, what you might do differently to other trainers, what you might coach in terms of range of motion. Could you just talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So you know we've all survived the onslaught of information that came out from the experts, quote unquote, in the field that said, you know, don't do leg extensions because of leg shear and this and that and the other thing. You know, over the years since I've been doing this, which is over 40, I've seen so many things come down the pipeline. This is dangerous. That's dangerous. Don't move your body this way, or you're going to have all these terrible things happen to you. And to me, it's a little irritating. But the sad thing about it is a lot of people do read this stuff and they believe it. And I use my point of reference of being in the fitness industry for a long, long time. And when I first got into it 40 years ago, there were some guys in Los Angeles that have been lifting all their lives, and their joints were fine. They didn't have knee care. They didn't have problems with their shoulder joints and their scapulas from doing lat pull downs behind the neck, and all these things. So when I hear these things, it bothers me, and we have to push back and we have to fight back on it. So the leg extension, um, there are forces when you go all the way through the movement that push the patella into the patella groove. And for most people, I don't think that's a problem. If you've got a lot of arthritis, if you have limited range of motion, if you've had a knee replacement, then perhaps that's something that you have to take into consideration. And one of the nice things about the MedX machines that I think is underutilized out there is you can set the range of motion by inserting the selectorized pin in the weight stack at a predetermined range of motion selection. So in other words, if you have someone that has limited range of motion and you overload and you load the weight and you don't want them to go, all the way back, you can limit that. Plus the MedX has the gauge on the side that shows for points of reference for future uses after you determine the range of motion, where those limits can be set. So full range of motion is not the best for all people. And as we, stay in this business longer and longer, we have a lot of geriatric clients who can't perform full range of motion. And everybody's a little bit different, and you've got to be in tune with your clients. And remember one thing for sure, nobody knows your body better than you. And that includes the clients. They get it. They know where their pain thresholds are. And a lot of what I do is based upon the feedback that I get from them.
Great answer. And do you believe, there's a lot of debate obviously about different ranges of motion, different protocols being more effective than another. It would seem to me that a lot of them really produce the same outcomes. But do you, in the context of, say, a leg extension, do you feel that a partial or limited range of motion is still going to provide the same benefits or most of the benefits as a full range of motion?
I really don't. I think you really need the full range of motion. And, there's a lot of benefit to pre-stretching with every repetition. And remember, the more you pre-stretch a muscle prior to contraction, the more muscle fibers are recruited during contraction. And, the whole reason that Arthur Jones wanted to perfect the CAM was to provide equalized resistance through the full range of motion so that there were no light spots or dead spots. So if you have dead spots, whether it's because of a mechanical disadvantage or a limited range of motion, that aspect of the muscle tissue is not being stressed. So I think you really, really have to try and make a concerted effort to stress out the entire body of the muscle through its full range of motion to get the optimum result.
Cool. Now I'm going to move on to chest press, and I'm trying to group these questions under specific machines because that would be a logical progression. But we may still bounce around. So
sure.
MedX Chest Press, very, very popular piece. I love the MedX Chest Press. I know a lot of people have that as their favorite chest press machine, and would prefer that over a lot of the other brands. Curious, and this is a submitted question, but something I'm very curious about is MedX Chest Press enables you to have a variety of different grips. You can grip now I'm going to get these words all wrong, but I'll try my best. So you can grip the handles where they're kind of vertical so that your palms are facing one another, or you can do like a pronated grip, or you can do something in between and hold the handles where they curve. I'm just curious, when might you use different grips, and what might be, I guess, the pros and cons of each?
I believe that when you go back and you reference all the original instructions and everything on the MedX machine, the intended grip was the where the bars are vertical, and that has a lot to do with the alignment of the ulna and radia bone on full extension, and would be what we call the elbow joint alignment instructions. But you can certainly use the other. When you go to the horizontal hand placement, that replicates more of a traditional bench press machine. Of course, the big difference between the MedX and machine and the bench press barbell is that when you're doing bench presses on a steel barbell of Olympic weight, there's no lateral movement possible with your grip or your shoulders. So when you come down in the eccentric, there's a tremendous amount of force that pushes out on the shoulder. Of course, that force is not going to be absorbed by the steel bar because it's not going to move. It's going to be absorbed and stressed by your shoulder because of the pressure that's pushing outward on what we refer to as the shoulder joint, the head of the humerus, the acromion process of the scapula and the clavicle. So it can result in a tremendous overload as you can actually tear muscle, tear connective tissue. The beauty of the MedX machine is it opens up as you come down, and that relieves that pressure in a natural, in a movement environment, so that it takes all that pressure off. You guys that do a lot of bench pressing and the old bench press champions, they've all had shoulder surgery because of stresses that are involved. And we don't see that. And that's one of the great things about MedX equipment. It's safe. It's safe for people to use. And I think, I hope I have answered your question. And I noticed in my notes there were some questions about the seat setting.
That's right. Yeah. Well remembered. You did. Just before you do comment on the seat. By the way, I've just closed a few things on my computer, so hopefully we won't have any technical issues. But let me know, Bill, if we do. But
Sure.
so for instance, I remember when I was using MedX Chest Press fairly frequently, I would have my hands holding that spot in between the sort of pronated and vertical grip,
Sure.
where it begins to curve. Now, is it fair to say that that's just personal preference and it's really about finding what's most comfortable for the user, or do you have other thoughts on that?
So I think that has a lot to do with it. I think that you have to, and that's another beauty of the MedX equipment. It gives you the latitude to find positions that are most comfortable. And we also know that once you're used to recruiting muscle through a certain pattern, if you vary it just a little bit, you'll recruit from different angles, and that can result in different stress aspects. So I encourage people to move it around a little bit, to try all three aspects.
Cool. And did you want to comment on the seat height? So how you might figure out the best seat height for a client?
Yeah. Okay. So there's two ways, and I always start with the adjustment of the seat height. So textbook MedX says when you grab the vertical handle and pull them back towards you, your fist could be pretty close to your armpit. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to sit the client down, have him push his hands out in a fist in a natural position, and hold them there, and then bring the movement arms forward. And it's either going to be high or low or just right. And I think using those two things in combination, you can come up with a perfect adjustment for the seat. Then there's the back pad. When you're holding the handle in the vertical position and your arms are extended all the way out, there should be 2 to 3 inches of space between your two fists. If it's wider than that, you're too far back. And if the fists are touching or it's closer than that, then you're too far forward. So that's the correct positioning on the seat and the back pad adjustment on the MedX equipment.
And a couple of times you've referred to a manual, is it? Like a MedX manual? Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Is that something that's available on the internet or for purchase or on Amazon or something like that? Do you know?
It's not that they produced early, it's got some of the original copies of that. And then there was the material that was produced by the University of Florida's Exercise Science Department at Gainesville. And I have those manuals as well. Plus, I also have copies of the maintenance and all of that for the MedX equipment. I guess I could make those available to anyone who might want to have them.
How might you do that? What, in terms of getting them online or on your website or something like that?
You know, Lawrence, that's a really good idea. It's a project. It'll take me some time to do, but I could certainly post this stuff on my on my website or YouTube channel. The problem now, as we all know, is MedX has gone through some real struggles, and it's no longer an entity. I know that there's some people working really hard to change that, but the website's down, the facility locator is down, and all the white papers and all the resources, there's no access to that. So I'll try to do my part and post as much of the stuff as I possibly can.
Yeah, that's cool. And just keep me up to date on that. But one thing I will say is you've got Delphex over in Europe who manufacture
Right.
MedX replica machines, I believe. I don't fully understand the
Yeah, they're in the
dynamic.
future.
Yes, correct. So, Keyser have obviously a exclusive agreement on MedX Machines for their entire franchise. And so I imagine they have very similar documentation. And in fact, I've seen some of it and it looks pretty good. It might not be as in depth as what you've described, but I will certainly have a look and talk to my contacts and see if we can make something available there as well, maybe in the interim. Who knows?
That sounds great.
Yeah. So okay, so I want to move on to the MedX Leg Press for a moment. This is a bit of a debated machine. There are some people that love the MedX Leg Press, and others that have some kind of minor issues with it. For example, and when you consider the trainee seat back angle, incongruent exercise, Bill Simone suggests that the seat angle should be set as low as possible to mimic the torso angle of a freehand squat. I wondered what you thought about that point of view and whether you might deviate from that advice at all when configuring the MedX Leg Press.
So, well, I can't disagree with that. When you're almost laying down, you do have more range of motion than the concentric aspect. You can extend farther for sure. Now, with that stated, when the chair back comes up, I think you get more of a pre-stretch in the glute in that aspect of the movement. So, there's three positions there. And again, you have to defer to what you want to get out of the exercise. What are you concentrating on? How does the client feel? I've noticed in my practice over the years that smaller people are much more comfortable having the seat back up at almost a right angle in position one, and larger people, because of a lot of different reasons, including mass, solidity in their torso, they're not comfortable that way, and they want to be back as far as possible. And I'll tell you, most of the people that I train, I have it in the middle position.
What number would that be, the middle position, from memory?
That would be two. That would be two.
Right, yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah, because it's only the free settings, isn't there, if I remember correctly?
Right.
Right.
And then, when you're setting the machine up, one of the things that I've noticed is overlooked a lot of times is the feet position is dependent on when you are fully extended and the movement arm hits those little red bumpers. That should take place just before the knees lock out. And that is the correct position for the seat. And then you want to come back as far as you can in the pre-stretch. And if you can't make it back, all the way, you can now set that range of motion, just like on the leg extension machine, you can set that with the pin. And that was in their original instruction, to be able to preset that range of motion, determine the range of motion with select right.
Now, one thing I noticed with the MedX Leg Press is how it was relatively easy to push a large amount of load on that machine. And you know, if you compare it to a lot of other leg presses, and you equate the
Correct.
loads, that it's quite a bit easier. And it's quite realistic to expect that some clients will max out the stacks fairly quickly. So what do you do to continue progression or make the MedX leg press more challenging for clients in that context?
There's two things, and it really depends on how aggressive they are and how far beyond the 500-pound weight stacks that they want to go. One, you can always have a training partner, or as you're training them, you can apply additional load with your own body weight on the movement arm, and that works well. And the other thing is you can substitute weight for time under load. And if you uh, just slow down your movement, in my mind, that's very, very similar to adding the weight because it's more time under load. Unfortunately, you can't, stack plates or hang 45 on the side of this thing. Not practical. But you can add additional weight by having a training partner or a trainer who knows how to add the weight on the movement arm.
And I suppose you can employ also other advanced techniques like rest pause, drop sets, or include other exercises
Exactly.
to pre or post exhaust.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's I suppose the best way to use it. Um,
Yeah, training. There's a lot of training techniques where you can you can destroy somebody on that machine quite easily. Go down and have Jim Flanagan put you through. He'll put your head in the toilet within no time at all.
yeah, I keep seeing photos with people training at Jim's place, and I'm always really jealous. So one of these days I'll get down there to have a session with him. That'd be a lot of fun. Um,
Sure.
before I move on from the leg press, it's such a popular piece. I just wanted to know if there's any other thoughts you've got in terms of best practice for using a MedX leg press with clients, stuff you've learned in the trenches, if anything comes to mind that you want to share.
Well, the main thing is setting the machine up properly so that you can get that full range of motion and you're not locking out your knees. And I'm looking at the old manual here, and it says sitting in the machine, push forward on the foot pad until the movement arms are against the stops. Those are those rubber stops I was talking about. Adjust the seat forward by pulling on the upper pair of handlebars. When properly positioned, knees should be slightly bent when legs are extended and movement arms are against the stops. Using the center-mounted handlebar, pull the foot pads back until your knees are as near your chest as comfortable. Insert the selector pin in the lower weight stack at the desired level of resistance. It is recommended that the same weight be selected on both weight stacks, of course. Note seat position, seat back angle, shoulder pad positions, and weight stack selections for future reference. Of course, we do that. But that is a further referencing how you determine the proper range of motion by not only the seat selection, but where the selector pin goes on the eccentric aspect of the movement.
Stuff. So moving on to the MedX Adduction machine. So this is another question that was submitted. So like the leg press, there are 3 seat angles that range from relatively vertical to horizontal. This is something that, again, this person has read about this via Bill Simone, but doesn't address, I guess, the pros and cons of the various seat angles. So we'd love to hear your commentary on how best to use that particular machine.
Well, are we talking about the abduction or the adduction?
Oh, we can talk. Well, we can start with the abduction and then move on to the adduction afterwards. If you have different things to say about each.
Okay. So how I adjust those with people is basically dependent on their size, and if you're a big person, I use the first position. If they're an average person, I use the center position. If there's a little tiny person, then I use the far forward position because it's much easier for them to recruit the force than it is if they're out, almost in a prone position. And you can if you can feel from the different angles, different accentuated recruitments on other muscles. But I think for the abduction machine, um, those are larger muscles, and you don't have all of the the, uh, the smaller support muscles like you do in the pelvic structure on the abduction. So I think it's much more general, and I don't think that it makes that much of a difference to the average person on the seat position, other than what's more comfortable for their body type.
And so it's another one of those where you kind of let the client decide what's going to be best for them in terms of their feel when they're on the machine.
Well, by this time, I think I can kind of look at them and know what's going to be most comfortable for them, where they're going to have the biggest advantage. And if I've got someone that is, pregnant or, 300 pounds, I'm going to select the seat back position based on what I've already learned over the years. I'm not going to say, well, how does this feel? How does that feel? What do you think? I'm going to preempt that and go on
Of
what
course.
I have learned over the years.
Of course. So some of these are obviously going to be fairly rapid fire, like that one, because that was quite easy for you to address. But moving on to the MedX Lumbar Extension, again, very popular piece, very effective lumbar exercise machine. Probably one of the best in terms of locking down a lot of the other muscle groups. So you're really focusing on the lumbar muscles. However, it's intuitively for many people, and I would almost say most people, it is an intimidating position, especially when you first put a client in there and you figure out, their level of flexibility, and it's quite an awkward position for them to be in. How do you personally talk to people and put them at ease when introducing them to that particular machine and coaching them through the movement?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right, and it is counterintuitive. And plus, they've been told by their doctors, their orthopedic people, their chiropractors, in most cases, that this is something that you should never do. And so, how I normally start the conversation is I reference what we have all known as quote unquote back exercises, and actually show them when you're on a hyperextension machine or a rivet ball, and you're going up and down in flexion and extension. It's not really your lumbar muscles that are doing the work, because the pelvic structure is rotating. And if the pelvic structure is rotating, you're getting recruitment from your glutes and hamstrings, and they can see that and they can visualize it. So I say, in terms of doing something that's gonna benefit your back and exercise the lumbar muscles, that's just not going to happen. And then a lot of times, if I have time, I'll tell them the story about Arthur, how he, struggled for years and years to come up with an effective way to um, exercise the paraspinal muscles in isolation. And this is what he came up with via the medical MedX machine. This is a kind of a copy of that without all of the bells and whistles and diagnostic capabilities. But then you explain to them how, with the restraining devices, when you're properly fit into that machine and the pressure goes on and you're driving the femurs into the pelvic structure, and it blocks it, so that when you go into flexion and extension, you are forcing the isolated contraction of the paraspinal muscles, and that's where you get the benefit. Then all of a sudden it makes sense to them. And they've also learned that, going into compression like that is bad, because they have been told by their chiropractors and doctors that the vertebrae on lordosa will compress down and squeeze the disc. So I have an anatomical manual that I always break out, and I show them pictures of the lumbar vertebrae, and I show them where the axis of rotation is in the spinous, in the facet joint, which is just in front of the spinous process. It's between the bodies of the vertebrae and the spinous process. The facet joint is where the axis of rotation takes place. And when you go back into lordosa, that actually opens up those vertebrae, creates a pumping action, creates blood flow, and all the benefits that we all know about. And then it makes sense to them, and then they go in and they do it. And then they can feel the warm spot in their lumbar, and they get a big smile on their face. They go, "Yeah, that really hits it. I understand." So I think you have to educate the people before you put them in there. You just don't say, hey, come on over here and try this. Then they got that worried look on their face, like, what the hell am I doing this for? What's going to happen to me? Seriously. But if you
Yeah.
educate them and they understand, and that's really what we do, isn't it? We educate people. We impart the knowledge that we have learned, and I think that's why we all do this, is to show the world that there is a effective way to do this in a great environment without injury. So if you educate them before you get them in there, you're not going to have a problem with it.
Absolutely. Just for, well, my own reference and some of those people listening, Lardosa, what does that mean exactly?
That's when you're all the way back.
Okay.
What? All the way back.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And just for those listening, for more reference on this, I've done multiple episodes with Dr. Ted Dreisinger, who you obviously...
Great guy.
Right, yeah, great guy. Who you saw speak with me actually at the Resistance Exercise Conference earlier this year. So we've covered this every angle possible. We did an episode together in the membership, and we did a short interview at that conference, and then a longer interview afterwards. So the listeners will be able to check those out if they really want to go deep on strengthening the lower back, which I think is, if you're a personal trainer or you own a studio, that I think that's really imperative to really understand that. Do you have any thoughts on protocol? So when you're coaching the lower back, do you tend to have the client pause in the extended position or fully contracted position, or how might you coach the movement generally?
I have them pause slightly at both ends. And, I always encourage them not to let the weight cut. And, I'm not serious when I say this, but I always say, hey, just to make sure you get your form right, just stick your finger in the weight stack there and make sure that they don't cut. You can't really do that. So you'd lose some fingers, but they get the point. If I can teach anyone anything when they come to visit me, no matter what machine they're working on, it's like, don't let the weights touch. Pause at the short end of the contraction, pause at the long end so that you can arrest that inertia and momentum, and you'll get so much more out of the exercise. So I referencing back to your question, we go nice and slow, deliberately, and we watch like on the medical MedX machine, we watch the stress of the muscle as it's shown on the the monitor. But on the exercise, the core of MedX Lumbar Extension machine, I do have them pause at the top for just a moment, and I make sure that the weight stack doesn't touch at the bottom, and I have them pause there for a moment, because it requires a lot more energy when you take that bounce out of it.
For sure. And the distinction between the two machines, the medical and the non-medical, is the only difference the diagnostic tool, the screen, or is there more variation?
I think the restraining devices are a little more intent on the medical machine, and the movement is great. It has a 500-pound stack on it, or is it 400? Either 400 and 500. I'll have to go look. Not very many people can do it, but every now and then you get somebody in that can. And on that machine, that's a lot of weight. I'm walking over towards it right now as we speak.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
It's a 400-pound stack. It's 380 on the big plates, and actually it's 490.
Wow.
Refresh my memory. Okay. 10 on the 2-pound and 380 on the big ones.
Okay.
And there's not very many people that can do that.
No, I absolutely. And, I remember when I was doing it fairly regularly, I was getting nowhere near that. Now it's just, I guess this is also interesting to know from the perspective of the prospective buyers who might be thinking about purchasing MedX and purchasing this type of machine. Do you know roughly what the cost difference might be between, say, a medical and a non-medical lumbar extension?
Well, the medical new, when they were new, they were $40,000 a piece.
Yeah, I thought as much.
And the other ones were what, six or seven. Um, if you look, you can find new medical MedX machine. The lowest I've ever seen them was 5,000, and they average about 10,000 a piece.
Okay.
And you got to make sure that you have the software. And my favorite is the old DOS. I think that was the best program they ever made. And there's a lot of practitioners out there that I run into that don't do the diagnostic. They don't do range of motion. They don't do a static strength test to determine the proper amount of resistance factor for dynamic exercise. And if you don't do that, you are just ignoring all of the research and the technology and the genius that went into these machines, plus the fact that if you preserve the first static strength test in the memory of the computer, then you can do a comparative analysis later on when you perform additional static strength tests, and you can compare the gain in strength, and in many cases, and a gain in range of motion. So you're going to do it right.
Yeah, absolutely. Some useful data you can obviously collect there. Moving on to the MedX Rotary Torso. Let me just have a look here. Okay, so
I saw that question. There was a gentleman that was having problems attaining a full range of motion, and I don't see that often. Maybe with people that are overweight or have had thoracic or spinal injury, but we usually are able to attain full range of motion with just about everyone.
right, okay, so that's unusual for you to see then, because he's saying that he felt that okay, so the rotary torso encourages ranges of motion that are inapplicable to the vast majority of trainees. Am I crazy? And you're saying, yes, you are crazy because I don't have that issue in my facility. Or you've not encountered that.
Yeah, we don't. I honestly don't see that. I see most people can get full range of motion. The limiting factor on that, as I previously mentioned, would be torso mass, previous injuries, things like that.
Okay. And is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that the machine where you move left and right?
Correct.
Right. Okay. I'm just trying to picture it in my head. Yeah, I mean, it's not something I can really comment on much either because I didn't really use it all that much. Yeah, although trying to reflect back now, I mean, it's been a few years, but I can kind of see where he's coming from in terms of, I think even myself, I might have felt it a tiny bit awkward to execute a full range of motion. But you're saying you've not seen that. Yeah.
Well, I guess that's why there are so many variables and so many different choices up there, because at some point in time, when they designed the machine, it must have occurred to them that not everybody has full range of motion, or what's called full range of motion. Full range of motion for you is different than it is for me or somebody else. So I think you just have to use the practical then to go to whatever your client is able to do. And it would probably be a goal to try and increase that incrementally. That's why they have the little tiny incremental measurement. So I think that's why the choices are there to accommodate for that.
Okay. So working up, because he's wrote here 6, so working up potentially from 6 upwards as the client improves their performance might be a good goal or a good way to progress that and improve that client's results.
Right. And another limiting factor on that is if you experience pain by trying to increase the range of motion during the movement, then I would use that as a barrier. I wouldn't push that, because you might be having a structural issue with stenosis or arthritis where you're not going to fix that through all the exercise in the world. It's just the way it is, and that becomes a limiting factor with a lot of subjects that are in their geriatric years or have those kinds of issues.
So you could probably see the next point, actually, because I forgot you've got access to some of these. There's some you don't have access to, which I will surprise you with. But the next one is in reference to the MedX Ab Crunch, and I can relate to this one. So again, Jack, who submitted this, he said he can't turn his hip flexors off, and they go into a spasm before his abs experience fatigue. Any thoughts on that? What might be your tips? Do you have any tips for being effective on that particular machine?
Yeah, just because we limit the movement through the range of motion with a particular muscle doesn't mean we turn it off. It's just like in the lumbar extension machine. Even though the glute and the quadriceps are not active in that movement, I don't know anyone who does not brace and push with their leg, therefore creating an isometric contraction, which burns up a lot of oxygen and causes the muscle to burn. It's the same thing in the abdominal crunch routine. Those muscles, abductors and hip flexors are still going to be bracing. They're going to be in a contraction. They're going to be burning oxygen, and it's going to produce muscular discomfort, some spasm, but they're not doing the work. The work is still being done only by the abdominal muscle because the hip flexors have been neutralized. They've been put out of commission by the restraining device, but they're still in an isometric contraction. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it kind of does, but surely if they're in an isometric contraction, they're still being utilized isometrically, so they're still being stimulated. Is that
They're being utilized. They're recruited and they're burning up oxygen in the blood supply system, but they're not actively involved in the movement because they can't be. The chain of movement has been arrested by the restraining device.
so?
Just like in the lumbar extension machine. When you're in that machine, your legs are pushing down, you're bearing down on the foot pad, and you're burning up oxygen, but there is no way in the world that those muscles are turning your pelvic structure. They're not bringing your torso up. It's now refined down to the isolated movement of the lumbar spine. Same thing in the abdominal crunch machine. Most people can't disconnect that. They're going to flex those muscles to brace, and they're pushing against those pads, but they can't possibly be actively involved in bringing your torso down. That's the abdominal contractions that are doing the work.
So reading between the lines, is it to say that they should just grin and bear it and
Yeah,
push through that discomfort? Is that kind of what you're saying?
that, yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah, you can't, I don't think you can shut that off. You just can't.
Um, any thoughts on coaching strategies in relation to the MedX Ab Crunch to ensure people, train with strict form and go right to failure?
Yeah, and I got to tell you, the old Nautilus clamshell abdominal clench machine, it's still one of the best. And I use both of them. They're just a little bit different. And Luke was talking to me when he was down here the other day in a follow-up conversation. He said, "Bill, which is the MedX machine that you least like?" And I would say in a line for the general public that just might be the arm cross machine, and the second might be the abdominal machine. So, they're still great machines. I have them. We use them every day. But on a scale of 1 to 10, which do you like the most? Which do you like the least? Those would be in there with the ones that I probably would like to least.
Interesting. Just a side note, or not so much a side note, but another question that's sort of related to this is I'm very curious on your opinion. So Doug McGuff's quite well known for saying that, if you're doing a pull down and you're crunching at the max contraction, then he feels that direct ab work, and specifically because I believe he has a MedX Ab Crunch in his facility, but he thinks it's superfluous in that context. Do you agree with that, or what's your thoughts?
Okay, you broke up a little bit on me. So I think what you're saying in the torso arm machine, when you pull down to do a compound exercise and pull it into an abdominal crunch. Was that what you said?
Sorry, yeah. So that's exactly what I said. So it's like in that context, would then an ab crunch be somewhat redundant if you're already doing that type of work in a workout?
Yeah, I would never teach that as a protocol because I'm so ingrained into the isolation work one at a time. But I wouldn't discount the value of going back to that torso machine when you're doing ab crunches and do pull downs. It would be akin to, pulling down on a rope in a kneeling position on an old crossover cable or something like that. That probably is, but I wouldn't encourage people to do both of them at the same time.
Mm. Okay.
I'm just so ingrained into the, isolation, one muscle group at a time, large muscles to small. And we've always finished with abdominal.
Yeah. No, I appreciate your honesty and your kind of
And then,
self
and
awareness.
then, yeah, and then you cross over into, that area where I'm pretty sensitive about, and that's not using your torso mass to assist in exercises like trap row, lat pull down. We've all been into conventional gyms, and we're seeing a guy sitting at the seated lat pull down machine, and he's lifting more weights than he could possibly handle, but with his torso mass, he's pulling backward using the erector spinae muscles in combination with the latissimus dorsi muscle to move the weights up and down. He's impressed, but it doesn't work. And so I'm really a fanatic about structure, form, keeping body mass out of it, and using a very strict guideline through the range of motion so that we don't cross over into other muscle groups, with the exception of the compound exercises that we're all familiar with.
Absolutely. So the next question I want to come on to is that around instruction. This is this is something that's debated quite a lot, and I think a lot of, especially new people in this industry in high intensity training, sometimes struggle to articulate the value of high intensity training or MedX equipment in this context. And also don't want to come across as being arrogant, but try and do it in a diplomatic and effective way to educate clients. So that is to set up this question, which is how do you explain to clients the value of working on MedX equipment versus what they see at 24-hour fitness in terms of, more popular commercial machines? As to the untrained eye, they look very similar. Any tips for
Great.
succinctly stating the superiority without sounding like you're full of shit?
Sure. Well, if I could quote Kim Wood, Kim who goes to the Discover Strength seminars.
Yeah.
He says it like this: there's Nautilus and there's MedX, and then there's store fixtures. But, and I think that's a great line, and I borrowed that from him many times over the years. But of course, that's not the PC way to say things. It's not diplomatic. So unfortunately, there's a lot of hard facts that we can fall back on. One of the things that I like to talk about is that the weight resistant setting are in 2-pound increments with the compound weight stack. And that enables resistance setting in 2-pound increments, making sure that the weight is never too heavy or too light, but just exactly right, which encourages, rapid progress in strength building. The other nice thing about the MedX that makes it stay is that the starting weight, and there are people out there that need the starting weight, is as low as 20 pounds. And that's a legitimate 20 pounds, where most other weight training apparatuses, it's 40 to 50 pounds, regardless of what the weight stack indicates. The foot-pound resistance is up there higher than some people are able to lift. The other thing would be the tested and proven variable resistance curve. The MedX inventors, they developed a cam design long time ago that facilitates the resistance level that varied throughout the full range of motion in imposing equalized resistance on the contracting muscle fibers throughout the full range of resistance. And that's something you just don't find in other types of equipment. There's always light spots. There's always dead spots. With the MedX, if you're using it properly, it's equalized resistance through the full range of motion. The other thing that's a big talking point is most body parts, when you're moving through the range of motion, their movement is about 2 feet. Most conventional equipment, the weight stacks travel about the same, about 2 feet. With MedX equipment, the travel distance in the weight stack is limited to a foot. Sometimes it's less than that. And what that means is it has less opportunity to develop inertia and momentum, therefore greatly reducing the chances of impact force related injury on the person that's doing the exercise. And then if you're out looking for the equipment and you want to buy it, there's all the other things, it's maintenance free. There's no guide rod, clean. It's easily adjustable on the seat. You might remember and reflect back and think of all the MedX machines that you've used. You can adjust the seat from the seated position, and you can also adjust the weight stack from the seated position. You don't have to get out, walk around the machine, change the pin adjustment, and then go sit down. Every single machine, the weight stack is adjustable by the user from the seated position, and that didn't happen by accident.
Mm. Yeah,
And the fact that there's no friction in any of the machines, virtually no friction, that means that 100% of the force recruited by muscular contraction can be applied against the resistant in the dynamic exercise, and there's a benefit to that as well.
Yeah, I thought that was excellent. Any more that come to mind on how you might articulate, or that's pretty extensive, to be fair.
Yeah, other than the fact that it's the Rolls-Royce strength training equipment and the best stuff that was ever invented, can't think of anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point you make there, which is that one of the most effective ways to communicate this stuff to people is by talking in their language, using analogy, Rolls-Royce, and highlighting the benefits. You don't necessarily have to get into all of the technical detail, and if you do, you're likely to cause them to what's the expression? Fall asleep, and you could achieve the opposite. So, yeah.
One of the things that we always tell people when they're coming in to look at the place, and my wife Debbie, who works here with me, she does most of the the tours with people, but she'll point out the fact that you don't find MedX equipment in most places, especially the big box gyms. And the reason that you don't find it, there's 2 reasons. Number one, it's prohibitively expensive. A big box club operator can buy 3 or 4 lines of regular equipment for what it costs for 1 line of MedX. And then the other thing is you actually have to teach people how to use it if they're exercising on their own. And, it's not for the simple-minded. This is a thinking person's, exercise world. It's very intelligent equipment. And if you understand that, you'll get it, and you'll be a big fan. For me, it's better to expose someone who has worked out with other modalities of exercise for a long period of time so they can really see and appreciate the difference. And as I tell people, once you get used to MedX, you'll never want to work out on anything else because it's so far superior to anything else that's out there.
Great line, that last one. That's I think what I'm going to do is I put together a short PDF with a couple of examples that you gave there of some of the ways to describe the benefit effectively to new clients, because I think you just did an ace job there. So I'll make a note to do that. The next thing I want to start talking about, and kind of before we wrap up, is just to talk about the maintenance side of things, which you did mention briefly. So a lot of the machines have Kevlar seat belts. How often have you, because you've owned MedX for a fairly long period of time, Bill, so I'm curious, how often have you had to replace belts in machines, if at all?
I have, knock on wood, I don't think, maybe once I had to replace the Kevlar belt, but I don't recall that ever being an issue. Those belts are on there pretty darn good. Oh, and I remember what happened. Somebody dropped the stack and it snapped the belt.
Huh.
and that's why it had to be replaced. Um, and I was not very happy with that individual. They last. I mean, they really last. They're awesome, and of course they're maintenance free. You don't have to oil them, grease them, clean them. Um, they're great. And the seat belts do, however, wear out, from time to time.
Mm.
But the Kevlar belts, I've never had an issue with them ever.
How might you go about if you did have to get parts? Where would you go for that?
I am always looking on eBay to see if they're a part, and sometimes people have them and they're selling them. And if I see a part that I might need in the future, I'll go ahead and buy it. Um, I also have a relationship with a fellow that custom makes, world famous motorcycles, Paul Yaffe Design. And he has a machine shop not too far from me, and he comes in and trains with me 3 times a week. So if I need a custom part, no matter what it is, he can make it. Um, and fortunately, again, I've never really had a problem. And, we're either training our clients or they're supervised. So we don't have people abusing the equipment, like you might have in a big box gym where they're dropping the weights and using impact force and things like that. And I'll tell you, that makes a huge difference in the life expectancy of your equipment and its part.
I bet.
It's supervising.
Yeah. There is one website that comes to mind called fullcirclepadding.com, which I'll put in the thread for this, but it's quite a popular place for owners of this type of stuff to get parts because they provide parts for everything, MedX, Nautilus,
Oh, okay, great.
across multiple generations as well as the more modern like hammer strength and pendulum. Say modern, should use
Sure.
contemporary is a better word. Machines, so that might be useful for you as well, Bill. Although I know you've got your sources, but
Yeah, I hadn't heard of them. I'm familiar with some of the other ones, but I just wrote that down. Full
yeah,
battle. I'm going to visit that. Thank you.
yeah, it's one that Mike Petrella told me about. He owns SGD Strength and Power,
Okay.
but you know Mike obviously
Sure.
in
Yes.
in Canada there, and yeah, he's got a enormous range of machines as well. So I'm sure
Yeah.
he uses that quite regularly. Um, Okay, so I mean, you mentioned obviously like, these machines are so over engineered and bulletproof that, which is great in terms of the MedX range, that not much has to be done. But have you got any advice, recommendations, best practices for keeping MedX machines in excellent working order aside from what you've already said?
Yeah. The one thing that I would caution everyone to never do, and that's to apply any kind of lubricant to the guide rod. They weren't designed for that. They were designed to be cleaned with 100% alcohol from time to time, and that takes the dust particles and the transfers of metal, cleans them off. And when the guide rods are clean, they work perfect. But don't ever make the mistake of applying grease, lubricant, WD-40 to that center guide rod. It's a big mistake.
Great advice. Um, Last question for you, Bill. And this is a very general question and might be probably answered it in a number of ways already. But are there any other tricks of the trade, specifically with regard to coaching people on MedX equipment, that you want to kind of impart on the members before we wrap up?
You know, I can't think of anything, one bullet answer. Again, I think form is critical. Form is everything. And even though the MedX equipment is designed and I consider it to be superior to everything else, you still have to instill on people the correct form and speed at which you do the exercise and doing everything you can to defeat learned skill and, inertia and balance so that you can get the maximum out of it. Because, if you're going to come in here and we're going to do the work, you want to get the most out of it. And we want to make sure that we're constantly training our clients and our customers and that we are educating them so that, when they go out into the world, they can impart that knowledge to other people, and that works for us with girls. So it's just really important to teach. It's really important to make sure that the form is correct, speed is correct, and also when you can get to 12 or 14 times from the weight, keep the progression. The doctors used to tell us when I first got into this business that over the age of 50, you were going to lose, 1 to 2% of your muscle mass every single year, and there wasn't a single thing that you could do about it. Well, we now know that that's not true. We well know that you can build muscle mass in people into their 90s, and we know how to do it. And we're not the Silver Thinker programs where they give you a 3-pound dumbbell and have you sit in a chair and do useless, bicep curls and overhead presses. We know that that doesn't work. We know that by overloading and continuing to apply increased resistance factors, we can stress the muscle tissue and we can force that muscle tissue to adapt to the stress and get stronger and stronger. And that's what the whole benefit is. And we know that, based on the fitness world that we live in and what we do for ourselves and our clients, we know that when people are fit, they require, less medical procedures, they have less medical consequences. And we know that if the world was fit, if our nations were fit, we wouldn't have a national healthcare crisis. People would be fit. And we just need to keep that message out there. We need to keep pounding that into the heads of our clients and those who are suspects of becoming clients, because it's a great message and we have a great resource and a great treasure that we can share with those around us.
A wonderful way to wrap this one up. What's the best way for the listeners to find out more about you, Bill?
They can email me at iamfitness@AOL.com. And I've had that address a long time, and it's all over the world, and I can't change it. And based on our
great email
experiences between, that's why I am a little bit challenged in the modern technology. I'm in my comfort level. That's okay with me. We also have a website, basictrainingscottsdale.com. But the best way is to, and on that website, we have links to a blog. We have links to the YouTube channel and Twitter and Facebook and all that sort of thing. I'm always posting things on my Facebook and also Basic Training. They have a Facebook page also.
Great stuff.
We are in downtown Scottsdale. If anybody's ever in downtown Scottsdale, the name of our facility is Basic Training MedX in downtown Scottsdale.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Bill, forgive my ignorance. What county is Scottsdale in again?
Maricopa in the state of Arizona.
Arizona, right? Okay, cool. So just for the for the global members and listeners, yeah, I mean,
Right.
I've seen obviously videos and tours of your gym. It looks amazing, and we've spoken at length, and you're obviously an excellent trainer. So I encourage the members, if they get a chance to obviously visit you, to have a workout at your place, and if their clients are traveling near you, then on holiday or something like that, then for them to pop in. I think that's something I really want to encourage in the membership, is this referring clients between one another when they're traveling, which really helps the industry. Because Ryan Hall, who's the owner of Exercise Science facility, did and a contributor to Body by Science, and people will know his name, did the hit list, which is a great list of organizations in an alphabetical order. I'm sure you're familiar, right? And then Doug tried to replicate it on drmcguff.com, but there's the website's broken. There's some code broken there, so I've just linked to that hit list from the membership. And what I might do is I might take ownership and update it, and just really encourage the members and the people in this industry to know who they can send their clients to, because givers gain and all of that. So I think that would be very helpful. But Bill, look, thank you so much for doing this. Really enjoyed learning about MedX with you. You know so much about not only the machines, but the way the body works. And it's so interesting hearing your perspective on this stuff. And thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's always a pleasure, and I love doing what I do and visiting with you and your followers out there. So thanks for including me, and ready to do it again whenever you are. Thank you.
Nice one, Bill. Take care.